Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Strategic Planning Committee. Date is Tuesday, 21st of April. Time is 14:02. Item 1, apologies for absence and notification of substitute members. Can I ask Democratic Services Officer whether any apologies for absence have been received?
Through you, Chair, apologies have been received from Councillor David Smith and Councillor Nigel Beryl, with Councillor Stephen Clark and Councillor Adrian Cartwright substituting.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do any members of the committee have any declarations of interest in any of the items under consideration at this meeting? Item 3, minutes. Do we confirm the minutes of the Strategic Planning Committee held on 17th of March 2026 as a correct record? Item 4, Chair's announcements. Members of the public are permitted to film, broadcast and report on the meeting, subject to the efficient running of the meeting not being affected. Only those people who have registered in line with the committee's speaking procedure may address the committee. Members of the public are requested not to call out during the committee's discussions on any item. Anyone who repeatedly disrupts the meeting may be asked to leave. All speakers will have 5 minutes in which to make their statements and are asked to remain seated after they have addressed the committee to answer any questions the committee may have. This meeting is being webcast on the Council's corporate YouTube channel. Therefore, when speaking, please speak clearly and concisely into your microphone at all times. There are no planned fire drills, so if the alarm does sound, evacuation instructions will be given by Democratic Services. Please ensure that any devices are switched off or onto silent modes. And for the benefit of the public watching remotely, I will now introduce the committee, starting with my furthest right.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name's Sian Webb. I'm Principal Planning and Highways Lawyer. Thank you.
Diana Davis, Democratic Services.
Scott Packer, Chair.
Simon Ellis, Head of Development Management.
Nikki Scaife, Major Projects Team Leader.
Councillor Rosie Humphreys.
Councillor Sally Keeble.
Councillor Bob Purser.
Councillor Stephen Clark.
Councillor Charles Manners.
Councillor Phil Bignell.
Councillor Ron Furman.
Councillor Richard Pipes.
Councillor Trevor Hughes.
Councillor Anthony Locke.
Councillor Dave Gaskell.
Councillor Adrian Cartwright.
Thank you, everyone. Agenda item number 5, 2023/6767/MAO, land to the north of Brackley, North SUE, Radstone Fields. I will now hand over to the case officer, Nikki Scaife, to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an outline application with all matters reserved apart from access for up to 150 dwellings, together with supporting infrastructure, including access roads, cycle and pedestrian routes, sustainable urban drainage systems, hard and soft landscaping, and car parking. In terms of committee updates, the committee update already referenced an additional neighbour comment that had been received regarding strain on community resources, impacts on roads from construction traffic, and loss of greenery on the edge of Brackley. The infrastructure requirements are set out in the officer report. A condition is also imposed requiring a construction management plan to manage construction traffic impacts. and also the impact on the character of the area and ecology are assessed in the officer report. In addition, we've had late comments from Anglian Water. The comments are that in terms of wastewater treatment, they confirm that Brackley new water recycling centre can accommodate the flows from the proposed growth. In terms of the used water network, they have raised objection to any connection into the foul network. However, they advise in order to overcome the objection, the applicant will need to consult with Anglian Water to identify a sustainable point of connection for the used water. So, and in the event of recommending approval, they recommend a condition to agree a foul water strategy. So condition 21, as set out on the report, has been amended to advise that no development shall commence until a strategic foul water strategy has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority in consultation with Anglian Water. That strategy should identify a sustainable point of connection to the public foul network, and prior to occupation, the foul water drainage works must have been carried out in complete accordance with the approved scheme. So that's an amendment to condition 21 as previously set out in the report. In addition, there's proposing that design and access, that we receive a updated design and access statement which demonstrates how the design of the scheme in respect of layout, scale and appearance, with particular regard to built form, materials, architectural detailing and boundary treatments, has been informed by the urban design principles as set out in Chapter 6 of the approved Radston Fields Design Code. So that's to ensure the design of the scheme relates to the immediate surrounding context of the built environment. And one further condition to add is in respect of submitting details of existing and proposed ground levels and finished floor levels concurrently with the submission of reserve matters. So this is the red outline for the scheme. Sorry, bear with me, just confused my notes. If I could just go on to the aerial view, so you can see the application site outlined in red. The site is situated to the north of Radston Fields that you can see here, and it's on the northern edge of Brackley. The overall site area is 9.74 hectares in area. So the site itself comprises the southern half of this agricultural field and extends to the east to include part of the former disused railway corridor, and also includes an area of wet woodland known as Foxhill Spinney along the southern boundary here. You have Radston Road along the western boundary, and you can see the construction of HS2 towards the north there. The site is enclosed by mature vegetation along all the boundaries, with the exception of the boundary to the north, which is currently open to the northern part of the field. As I say, to the south and west, you've got Radston Fields, and then you've got associated recreational areas along the edge of Radston Fields there. The eastern boundary is the former Helmden disused railway corridor. This area here is allocated as a green infrastructure corridor under the South North Hants local plan. The extent of the corridor as it goes north is a site of scientific special interest. So that lies outside of the site, but it does border that northeast corner of the site. The site slopes gently from north to south. It's in flood zone 1, and there's a small watercourse that runs along the western and the southern boundary. And there's 2 overhead power lines that run across the site. One's roughly that area, and then there's another one along the north of the site, which we'll see clearer in a plan that I'll show you in a minute. This just shows, so you have the application site there. This just shows it in the context of kind of nearby sports pitches, primary school, and then the local centre at Radston Fields is there. And just in terms of bus service provision, so that the site's situated to the north, and this is the Stagecoach 500. So there's reference in the committee report to the nearest bus stop on Poppyfields Way, and that's that bus stop there. And that service is the Bicester to Banbury service. But as I say, the application is in outline with all matters reserved except for access, and details of layout, scale, appearance and landscaping. The reserved matters would be submitted for approval at a later stage. But the application is supported by this illustrative master plan, which shows how the site could be laid out for up to 150 dwellings. So you've got an expanse of open space to the north and south. And then it's showing enhanced perimeter planting around the eastern and western boundaries. And the overall site would include ecological enhancements, and you've got SUDS features there to the south and smaller ones along the eastern boundary and the western boundary there. The overhead power line, you can just see the line of that one to the north, which runs across there. And members that went on the site visit, that's the point of one of the pylons that's situated on the site. Access to the site would be from Radston Road, single point of access there. In order to protect the adjacent SSSI from any recreational use, there is a detail which would be required by condition in the landscape and ecological management plan for details of perimeter fencing along here to avoid any recreational people straying from the site onto that SSSI. And that's just a more detailed illustrative landscape strategy, which shows a bit more detail on indicative landscaping scheme. In terms of, this is an access and movement parameter plan. So the blue roads are the main streets indicated. You've got the purple routes, which would be secondary streets. And then you've got the green routes, which show cycling and pedestrian routes throughout the site as well. This is the proposed access. So this would comprise a T-junction onto Radston Road with footway either side. This footway here would be extended as a 3-metre footway cycleway, so that would connect down to the, there's a roundabout just off the plan here, so that would connect down to the existing roundabout and cycle network. You can see here, there's an existing gateway feature, which I'll show you on photos, but that's shown there on the plan. There would be minor curb line readjustments to Radston Road to provide a 5.5 metre carriageway width, and the existing 30 mph speed limit, which is currently situated south of the access, probably round about here, that would be extended to the north of the site, and also with additional speed reduction measures, giving priority to vehicles heading north along Radston Road. So just show you some photos of the site. This is the view of the site from Gold Avenue. So that's southwest of the site. That's the roundabout there, and the cycleway pedestrian way would extend along there up to the access. But this is the application site. You can see the greenfield in the distance and note existing vegetation around the site. This is the view looking northwards up Radston Road. You can see the existing gateway features either side there. And as I say, that speed limit sign would be moved further up Radston Road. The access approximately there on Radston Road. The application site you can see to the right-hand side. And I can't go back. You can actually see the electricity. So this is looking from the north of the site along Radston Road, and you can see the electricity pylon. So that effectively is the northern limits of the site, where you can see that pylon and the electricity lines there. This is a view to the south of the site from Flanders Way. So the site is, you can just about make the site out between the trees there. So that's the start of a recreational route that goes through the open space on the edge of this development. And you can see the trees of Foxhill Spinney to the right there. And this is just a view, again, looking towards the application site along that recreational route. This is along the southern boundary of the site. This is another view from recreational area to the west of the site. So there's the site there, electricity pylons in the distance. And then a view from Radston Road and Utah Lane, again, the site in the distance. And that's the roundabout there that we saw earlier, Radston Road extending up that way. So in terms of principle of development, the site does sit outside the adopted settlement confines for Brackley as defined in the South Northamptonshire local plan. Policies of the current local plan do support the delivery of housing beyond settlement confines. However, those policies and the exceptions therein don't apply specifically to this site. So the exceptions are, for instance, if the site's allocated within a made neighbourhood plan, if the site's for starter homes or self-build custom homes, for instance. However, the site is subject to a potential allocation for residential development for approximately 150 dwellings in the Regulation 18 draft local plan under policy B6. In addition, in respect to the council's 5-year housing supply, following the recent appeal for the development proposal for 700 houses at Brackley, the inspector in his decision determined that the council could only demonstrate a maximum supply of 4.56 years of housing provision. So having regard to that, paragraph 11 of the National Planning Policy Statement advises that planning decisions should provide a presumption in favour of sustainable development. Paragraph 11D and footnote 8 to that paragraph of the NPPF, the details of which are set out in paragraph 7.16 and 7.17 of the committee report. That advises where policies important for determining the application are out of date, permission should be granted unless the decision maker can show identified harms which would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the proposed development. So that's referred, it's referred to as the tilted balance. A report's also going to Planning Committee tomorrow night in respect to the Council's 5-year supply and that appeal decision. That report, which the agenda for which has been published, that acknowledges the Council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year supply, housing land supply, and that until such time as an updated housing land availability assessment demonstrating a 5-year supply is produced, the tilted balance is engaged. So whilst it's acknowledged there would be some visual harm arising from the proposed development, it's considered that an appropriate level of mitigation could be achieved through the enhancement of existing vegetation and additional landscaping and through an appropriate design and detailing of levels for the scheme. Furthermore, there are no objections from any technical consultees subject to conditions and obligations as set out in the report. The development would provide a policy compliant provision of 40% affordable housing and developer contributions towards healthcare, early years, primary and SEND education, library and refuse provision. In terms of open space, a maintenance contribution would be secured through a Section 106 agreement with the offer of transfer of the open space to Brackley Town Council. In terms of BNG, the application predates BNG, but there are a number of ecological enhancements and habitat creation proposed for the site. The details of that would be secured by condition, and our ecology officer raises no objection. So on balance, the benefits of the scheme in terms of contributing towards the council's 5-year housing land supply, the provision of 40% affordable housing and the ecological enhancements are considered to weigh in favour of the proposal. In the absence of any significant and demonstrable harm, officer's recommendation is for approval subject to the conditions and obligations as set out in the officer report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nikki. Any questions? Councillor Bignell, please.
Yes, I mean, it's admirable that we're getting 40% affordable housing, but when we get a proper plan in front of us in terms of a detailed plan, could that change in terms of viability, that famous word? Or is that 40% fixed at this point and that will happen in the future? This is my first question.
So that 40% would be secured through the Section 106 agreement.
So that can't change.
Well, any developer could come back and amend, seek to amend a Section 106 agreement, but they'd need to evidence and justify that.
Okay. The second one, in terms of cycle or pedestrian access, there's only the one entrance, which is the vehicular access. Is that right? Why is there not one down the bottom southern point, which you're going all the way up, halfway up the hill to come back to yourself? It just seems that. I was thinking on the right-hand side down where we walked along to. So there's an unofficial sort of bit down there.
So there's quite a ditch. There's quite a change in levels down there. So it'd take, and also you've kind of got ecological enhancements proposed down there. So it is a balancing act. The level of construction to provide that connection could have this subsequent detrimental impact on kind of ecological enhancements.
It just seems that the whole of the estate only has one in and one out. It just seems an unusual way to put it together. It doesn't integrate with the surroundings, shall we say?
Yeah, I mean, it is that the site is slightly constrained in that way, particularly to the east where you've got the green corridor and the triple SI. And as I say, there's levels, and also you have got kind of Fox Hill, Spinney, and some kind of ecological enhancements proposed. So it's a balancing act of those.
Councillor Pipes.
The electricity pylons, the ones going through the middle of the site, will they be buried in the ground?
We haven't got that detail at the moment. I mean, that would be part of the, once we get to, if we got detailed reserve matters, we'd have a greater understanding of what the developer is proposing to do at that time.
Okay, and the pylons on the north of the site, how far are they away from the residential buildings? Because they look very close. I can't see a scale.
Yeah, I haven't got, this is an indicative layout that we're looking at here. Estimate probably about 25, 30 metres as shown on that illustrative layout. As I say, detailed design would be subject to reserve matters.
I must admit, I'm going to find this very difficult to make a decision on because it's very steep. I mean, any self-respecting mountain goat would love to live there with their wife and kids, pun. But we haven't got a topography of the site. It seemed really, really steep. So, I mean, when I looked at it, where we were stand on, was it Flanders Way? I looked at that hill and I thought this would make a great sledging hill. So I don't know how we're going to do and obviously there are ways of doing it, and it's obviously going to be cost effective for them to do it because they've looked into it. But I find it very difficult without topography and how it's all going to be laid out and how close it is going to be to the pylons to make a proper decision on this one.
I mean, we are looking at the principle of residential development, not the details of the layout. As I say, this is a illustrative layout. I mean, as you saw on site, the site does drop from north to south, and you can see on the photos there as well. So there is a condition proposed for levels, and that will be part of the detailed design and kind of designing it sensitively. Because also what we would look to avoid with sites like this is kind of exposure of significantly higher retaining walls. So it will take some detailed design to work with the levels that you have on site. But it's not an unusual circumstance that happens with quite a few sites where you get quite significant variations in levels.
Councillor Keeble.
Sorry, I've got questions about the housing and also about the healthcare. Under the housing, it's not actually very clear at all what will be provided there, because it says 40% affordable with a 10-year split of 70% social affordable rent. There's a big difference between social and affordable, and if we're doing social housing to rent, which would be very welcome indeed, that's different from saying it's affordable housing. It would be good to know whether it's social housing or affordable housing, and if it's going to be social housing to rent, then that would be important to be clarified, because that's probably where we've got the biggest housing shortage. Then the second question from that, because if it's social housing for rent, if it's at 70%, that means it's 42 social housing units, which would be really good. I mean, I think it's about the second biggest social housing allocation that we've actually looked at, certainly since I've been on this committee. Who would have the nomination rights? Because Brackley is obviously very close to Milton Keynes. It's closer to Milton Keynes than us. And logically speaking, we should have the nomination rights to those properties. So it should be people off our homelessness list, our housing list, who should get that, which is really important because we desperately need those units. However, I mean, it would be important to know who's actually going to be managing it, because if it's a housing association that builds, provides and manages, then you know, they might want to do some direct allocations. I'm not sure if they do that now, or, you know, whether they're going to take all off the council's housing list. And that makes a huge difference to what actually gets delivered and the usefulness of that housing. Because if it's housing which is provided, you know, on the open market, then it might not help us at all in terms of meeting the housing needs of West North Hants. And then you've got the 30% intermediate. And it would be good to know what intermediate means, because I'm assuming that it means somewhere between affordable and full market rent. And that in the Brackley area is quite a big whack of money. So that is probably not going to actually help our housing need very much. So it'd be really useful to have clarity about what we're looking at here and what the impact would be on the housing needs for West North Hants, and in particular on those housing lists, like we've got 3,000 people waiting for housing. Is this going to help to ease any of the pressures there? Then on the healthcare issues, that looks really good for primary healthcare led facilities. And I note that on the map you showed, there was the sort of community hospital quite nearby. I understand we've actually got quite a lot of Section 106 funds which are earmarked for health but not allocated yet in various pots. And it would be useful to know if there's thought about how this money would be used, so that the money does actually produce quite quickly some benefits for the community in terms of healthcare facilities. Thank you.
Okay, in terms of affordable housing provision, so the 70% it is social rent effectively. Yes, yeah. So the nominations would be through, it would be our housing would be guided by our housing strategy team, but that would be through West North Hants. In terms of generally it set out in the 106, the applicant would be, or the developer would be required to provide details of registered providers that they're intending to go with to deliver that affordable housing.
Okay, so can we just be absolutely clear that if we agree to this, then we are absolutely agreeing that we get 42 social housing units delivered for allocations for the nomination rights to go to West Northants Council?
So the number, I mean, this is an outline consent for up to 150, so it depends, the actual number of houses would be dependent on whether it's a total of 150 houses that comes forward in that final layout, but it would be 70% of, well, we get 40% of that overall number of whatever the final layout is.
And the other 30%?
So intermediate, generally, you're looking at shared ownership provision.
And that would be provided by the developer? Would the developer manage that?
That would be details to be agreed,
Okay.
but yeah, we haven't got that detail at this stage. In terms of healthcare, just bear with me whilst I don't think ICB being specific. Yeah, effectively, it's funds to mitigate the impact of this within the local primary care network. So that would, the likelihood is that would be within the Brackley area. They look at kind of the most immediate, but it's whatever that primary care network encompasses, they would look to provide enhancements, for instance, extensions to existing facilities within that area.
Chair, the point about the ICB is that I think our communications with them aren't actually of the most effective. And it would obviously, I mean, this is a really big, this is a really valuable contribution to primary healthcare facilities. And it would be most important to ensure that those are achieved quickly. I wonder if there's some way that we could ensure that happens.
In terms of achieving that quick, I mean, we will put triggers in consultation with the ICB within the 106 agreement as to when that money is to be paid to the council. Then there'll also be a trigger in terms of I can't remember off the top of my head, it's either 5 years or possibly 10 years in which this is part of the Section 106 negotiations by which that money has to be spent. So that will, as part of the 106 drafting, those discussions will take place with the ICB. Obviously, the ICB and their programme of delivery is something also that we don't have specific control over. We only have control over the triggers within the 106 and also to make sure that that money is spent on mitigating the impacts of this development.
Councillor Manners.
Thank you, Chair. I would sort of develop the point that Councillor Pipes mentioned about the pylons. What would really concern me is that if we found ourselves putting all the social and affordable housing at the north end of the site, and if I just read on the internet about electromagnetic fields, they say 30 is allowed, meters is allowed. There's no legislation, but 100 meters is where it sort of is diluted. And I think it's a suboptimal plan, taking into account Councillor Bignell's comments too about access, particularly pedestrian access. What assurances can we put at this stage that the affordable housing and social housing won't be put up at the top of the site? Because we should be about placemaking here, and we should be about creating good communities that are sustainable. And that just worries me, that we're actually trying to fit something in here to suit the developer. And your point about access from the thing, that's down to cost. I mean, just let's be quite clear. I mean, the developer could easily put a pedestrian access and across that southern end of the site, but it's cost that's driving it. Your reasoning is perfectly valid, but I would suggest that it's cost driven. So what conditions can we put on where the affordable and social housing go, please?
I mean, that would be down to the detailed layout. In terms of controlling where that would be down to future discussions. Generally, within the 106, we'll set out details about clustering of affordable housing, and that it should be indistinguishable from the market housing. In terms of where that goes on the layout, that would be subject to future discussions with the case officer. I think it's a difficult thing for us to condition now that you don't put that there, the affordable housing to the north of the site, but I think we would.
Well,
have to
I
look
think
at
we should try and find a set of words, because as night becomes day, they will come back if we do put this in and then say that the viability has changed and that they want to reduce the amount of affordable housing. So, I mean, this is where I see this going, and that's what worries me. It would be good if we could find something firmer on this. And the sort of second question within this point, Anglia Water, I'm slightly astonished that they haven't responded at all. Is that normal?
Apologies, Councillor Manners, can you repeat that?
Anglia
last?
Water, I'm astonished that they didn't respond.
So it was a late consultation, however, they did have time to respond, and yeah, that has just come through to us. But as I say, they've raised that concern, but they're happy.
They're happy overall, are they?
For it to be
Sorry,
conditioned.
I missed
Yeah.
the English prelude. Okay.
Subject to that condition to agree a foul water strategy,
Okay.
yes.
So what can we do at this point to ensure that we don't have social and affordable housing at the top end of the site?
So we could add a condition in terms of agreeing a 10-year layout to be submitted, which generally happens anyway, but to be submitted along with the Reserve Matters approval, so that we can then approve that 10-year.
And does that Reserve Matters come back to this committee?
It would do, yes. Yeah.
We're within our rights then to refuse planning permission on that Reserve Matters plan if we don't like it. And would that legally stand up from a planning process point of view?
Yeah.
So what you can do is you can phrase a condition that requires the 10-year layout plan to be submitted as part of the Reserve Matters, so that this committee then has scope to determine the Reserve Matters and the 10-year layout at the same time. So then what you wanted to do is make sure that, as you just pointed out, that the affordable housing isn't lumped in all of the worst environmental area on the site, isn't it? That's we can make sure as part of the discussions leading to the Reserve Matters submission and the 10-year layout plan that's illustrated for you.
Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you. Just on that point the officers raised, where we would agree, we'd still be agreeing to development in principle, wouldn't we? Notwithstanding then agreeing to a 10-year layout. My view is, well, obviously the potential contribution to social housing is very welcome. I totally share the concerns about proximity to the pylons, and Nikki described it as gently sloping. Just following up on Councillor Pipe's point, it's quite a steep gradient, isn't it, at the site? What exactly is it? Thank you.
So it's approximately 140 metres AOD to the north of the site, and then it drops to 125 metres into the south.
Councillor Cartwright.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I'd just like to make clarification on the green space, please, because in the agenda it says the provision is to transfer the freehold of the open space play areas and allotments to Brackley Town Council. But I believe I heard in the presentation there that there would be an offer to the council, and since they're objecting to this, do we have any clarification on if they would actually take the green space, or is that just a hope to slip that in there and not have to put the management company bit in?
I mean, in terms of other developments around Brackley and also the recent 700 dwellings site. The 106 has got provision for, and they've expressed interest to take on. So that's generally been the nature of open space within that area that Brackley Town Council would prefer to take it on. So that's how it would be offered within the 106 as drafted.
Thank you.
Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Is it possible to have the sustainable drainage system explained a little bit? My understanding is that they're going to basically just use natural fall away water. Obviously, you've got that gradient at the top of the hill. And if you get heavy rain down there, you're obviously going to just get drainage water just flooding away somewhere. And who's going to be responsible should that fail in years to come? Thank you.
So, I mean, that would be part of the discussions in terms of the transfer, because the SUDs are part of the open space, so it would need to be that discussion with the town council as to whether they want to take the SUDs on as well. If not, we'd look to a management company to take on those. But the detailed design of the drainage, there are conditions for more detailed design of the drainage to come forward that would be referred to our lead local flood authority for approval as well.
Okay, do you have any more questions? Please.
Thank you, Chair. On the land supply issue, so can this site be delivered within the 5 years of the land supply? And given the discussions we're having about inspectors expecting us to have a deliverable land supply of 5 years, as we give this, assuming we give this permission, can we insist that it's delivered within that period so that we can assure an inspector at a future appeal that we've got a deliverable land supply in this area?
So in terms of the time limit condition at the moment, as it stands, they submit reserve matters within 3 years. You can reduce that. There haven't been any discussions with the applicant in respect of reducing that any further.
To add to that, what you can't do is you can reduce. You have a legal power to reduce the time within which the permission should commence. But what you can't do is force a rapid delivery, because we can't make them complete the development in a certain amount of time, because that's completely unreasonable, because if the economy tanks or if whatever happens and they suddenly can't build it. So it is an inexact science, this delivery of 5 year supply, and it is very difficult for local authorities to insist on build out rates, because it's to do with the ups and downs of the housing market and delivery. So, but the only power that you have available, if that's what you're really concerned about, is reducing the time within which development commences. But we wouldn't recommend that. I don't think that would be reasonable personally, but that is within your power if that's what you're concerned about.
Okay, are we all done, committee? Okay, so we move on to public speaking. Can I invite Ashley Collins, please, to step up?
Chair, members of the committee, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I appear this evening as the agent for the applicant in support of the outline application in front of you. I'd like to begin thanking officers for a clear, comprehensive and carefully balanced report, which assesses this proposal on its own planning merits and concludes that it is a scheme which should be approved, subject to conditions and the completion of a Section 106 agreement, which we're currently in discussions about. We fully support that recommendation. This application concerns a modest, well-contained residential development immediately joining the built edge of Brackley. Officers are satisfied that the principle of dwellings is acceptable and that the proposal represents a logical extension of the settlement rather than a sporadic or isolated development. Brackley is identified within the development plan as a rural service centre, and officers conclude that the site benefits from reasonable access to services, facilities, employment and education. Importantly, the site is also clearly defined and well contained. Although HS2 lies beyond the site boundary, it is now a defining feature of the landscape that influences how it is experienced. Together with the site's edges, landscape features and proposed mitigation, the development would be a contained and a natural extension of Brackley. For that reason, officers conclude that the proposal would result in no unacceptable harm to visual amenity or landscape character. Whilst the landscape effects are acknowledged, they are carefully assessed and found to be limited and localized and capable of being suitably mitigated through the layout and landscaping that's on screen. This is reflected in the officer's conclusion that landscape impacts do not significantly outweigh the benefits. We appreciate that this site lies outside the adopted settlement boundary and recognise that members may be cautious about that. However, the officer's assessment is clear. The policies restricting development by settlement confines are out of date, and the question for members today is not whether there is some policy conflict, but whether the harms significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Officers conclude that they do not. In this respect, members will also note that the site's suitability is reinforced by the fact it is identified as a proposed housing allocation in the emerging local plan. Whilst officers correctly afford that limited weight at this stage, it is nonetheless demonstrates that the principal scale and containment of development at this location are considered appropriate when planning for the future of Brackley. Turning to technical matters, officers confirm that all relevant issues have been thoroughly assessed. There are no outstanding objections from statutory consultees, apart from the item that was raised, but that can be suitably addressed by condition from the late response this morning. Highways impacts are acceptable, flood risk and drainage can be appropriately managed, ecological impacts can be mitigated, delivering biodiversity net gain, and impacts on neighbouring amenity are acceptable. Officers are satisfied that conditions and planning obligations can address all identified matters. And just turning to one item that was raised earlier about layout and the pylons, the proposed indicative layout on the screen is just indicative. It's an outline application. That layout has a 22% biodiversity and conservation area given over to it, plus 36% of the site is given over to open space. So that seems to me that there's an opportunity as part of the reserve matters to require that buffer closer to the northern edge that would come through as part of reserve matters and maybe satisfy some of the concerns raised today. And also just in terms of the southern boundary, that's a river. So we did look at access to that point, but it was deemed unfeasible because it would need to cross a river onto private land. The scheme delivers clear and substantial public benefits, 150 homes, policy compliant 40% affordable housing provision, contributions towards education, healthcare, public open space, and environmental enhancements. Officers afford these significant weight in the balance. Crucially, this is a scheme that is deliverable. Officers identify there are no impediments to delivery, and the proposal is not reliant on strategic infrastructure or other items which might cause delay. In the current context, the ability to deliver homes in the short term is an important consideration. In the wider context, members will be aware of the government's clear and sustained focus on boosting the supply of housing, particularly in locations which can deliver well-planned homes sustainably and without undue environmental harm. Only then is it appropriate to briefly refer to the inspector's recent decision on the 700 dwelling scheme in Brackley. Officers correctly treat that decision as context, not as a determining factor. It is relevant insofar as it confirms that the council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land, reinforcing the weight to be given to sustainable and deliverable housing proposals such as this one. That said, the proposal does not rely on that appeal decision to be acceptable. It is acceptable in its own merits, having been assessed as a well-located logical extension of Brackley. Is that a 30-second warning, or is that time? Okay, just to say, you're being asked to determine it, and thank you for your time, and we respectfully ask the committee to align with the officer's recommendation, so thank you.
Committee, do we have any questions, please, for Ashley? Councillor Pipes?
Would you be happy to play under the electricity pylons with your children? Up for weeks on end, months on end?
Would I be happy to play with my children?
Yes, you're hesitating. Electricity pylons on the green space.
Yeah.
Nice big playing field. That's where children will go and play. Would you be happy to play with your children, or would you be happy to just play with you and your mates, kicking a football around? Let's forget the kite flying hazards, but would you be happy to play under those pylons?
Yeah, I would. So I live in London. There's plenty of public open space and recreational grounds that have pylons crossing them. These pylons are 132 kV rather than the 400 kV, so they are smaller and lower electrical loads.
You'll be happy?
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're not in London. I think we can probably do better, really. But yeah, okay.
Councillor Keeble?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask particularly about the housing provision. I appreciate this is just, outline and so on. But could you say what your thinking is about social housing providers, and if what you might be thinking of in terms of partnering on this? I appreciate that it's early stages and you're not there yet by a long shot. And the other thing would be in terms of the viability. I mean, is the thinking you've done robust? Because obviously, and again, I mean, you're hardly going to say no, but we obviously don't want to be in a position of finding that the allocation gets reduced, or that it gets shifted from social housing to rent to affordable, or into, particularly affordable housing for sale, to make sure that we can, that if we agree these proposals today, we can look forward pretty confidently to seeing a contribution towards dealing with the council's most critical housing needs.
Sure. Yeah, at the risk of frustrating it, it is early in the process in terms of providers. That hasn't been determined yet. The ambition, obviously, in the Section 106 is for that to be policy compliant and in accordance with the tenure split that was set out by the officer.
You might have a range of people in mind.
I haven't been informed of any providers that the applicant is working with, but they will be working with providers, and that will come forward as part of the reserve matter stage. In terms of to your point around the Section 106 and confirmation, it's my experience that Section 106 is a very, very difficult to open and renegotiate, especially on a scheme like this where the affordable housing provision is being given great weight by the officers in a recommendation for approval. So something that sort of does strike to the heart of the permission around affordable, to then reopen the Section 106 on the basis that that is no longer viable, if that's the argument at that time, that would be due course for you to say that that's not acceptable. We wouldn't have approved it on that basis. So it is my experience, it's very, very hard to just submit an amendment and get it changed.
Councillor Manners?
Just going back to this footpath coming down south of the thing, why wasn't it feasible?
So there was two suggestions at the time. One was that that footpath could follow the route of the triple SI, and we thought, well, there was competing tensions there. One is to keep people away from the triple SI for reasons of ecological conservation. So we, together with officers, thought that was not the right solution. And secondly, there is the drainage strategy is to, as someone referenced, is a surface water drainage strategy is to drain naturally into the watercourse. So that is why one of the reasons there's the SUDS is on the southern part, and then you would have to cross a river onto private land, and that was deemed unfeasible. I would need to check, but it's two house builders from recollection to the south. I couldn't comment on it being a ransom strip because we have a primary point of access, and the diversion from the proposed access onto there wouldn't save significant walking or cycle journey times.
Councillor Purcell.
Yes. Do you have a timeline for this development at the moment? Because the rationale is that this will contribute, or the rationale for going outside the existing plan boundary is that it will contribute to the 5-year land supply. So do you expect this development to be completed in 5 years?
It wouldn't. We're not necessarily saying it would be completed within 5 years. Any 5-year housing land supply is made up of I was going to say sort of rich tapestry of a multitude of sites making that contribution, and this is one part. But it would be my expectation it would be commenced within 5 years, and the condition 1 requires reserve matters within 2 and commencement thereafter within 3.
Okay, do we have any other questions, committee? No. Councillor Pipes?
The pylons in the middle of the site, will they be put underground?
My understanding those are 33 kV, so they're much more localized power. And again, we don't have the detail on the reserve matters, but I would have thought that was more viable to drop those power lines, put those power lines underground. They're much smaller. Not confirmed that would be part of reserve matters.
Councillor Manners?
Just going back to the pylons and the KVA, whatever the definition is, if the National Grid, when they're upgrading the network, which they're doing throughout, if they actually increase the power that's going across those lines, would they have to come to you as a developer or to get that approved?
I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, so we are at risk then, depending on.
I just don't know. I'd be misleading you. Sorry. It is to say that they do have design guides, National Grid, and so we would be respecting those in terms of standoff distances recommended by them. But thereafter, that's what I don't know. Sorry.
Councillor Hughes?
Thank you, Chair. Radstone Road, I don't know if this is a question for you, but the HS2 site at the northern end, do you know what that's going to become? I'm just wondering what Radstone Road will look like in 5 or 10 years' time. Is it going to become a busy road because there's only one access into the development?
As part of this application, we've not been made aware of any proposals to upgrade that road. Indeed, our proposals is to reduce the speed limit on that part of the road that concerns our site.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Cheers. Can I ask the officers, are there any points they want to come back on, please? No. Okay, so I move this committee to debate this application, please. Anyone want to start? Councillor Pipes?
Yeah, I'm very uncomfortable with the pylons position. And as Councillor Manners pointed out, they could also be upgraded. And I certainly wouldn't live there. My wife wouldn't allow our children to be playing under pylons, even without a kite. But I don't like the idea at all.
Councillor Keeble?
Yes, I appreciate the point about pylons and concerns about the health consequences of them. However, the science about that is deeply contested. There are, I mean, it has been considered very frequently, including not only any possible health risks, and as I say, they are the actual practical health risks are disputed, but also the mental health risks of people being concerned about the consequences of living close to pylons and being worried about them. And I certainly, so that I mean, clearly the health consequences of the pylons, particularly given the level, the amount of electricity going through them, it wouldn't seem to me to be sufficient to justify turning down an application for housing, given all the other measures, all the other pros and cons of this particular development. And obviously there's issues about visual impacts and so on. However, from my point of view, some people wouldn't want to live close to pylons and wouldn't want to play under pylons, but some people wouldn't take that attitude. And I think that provided whatever national guidance is in place around health impacts of pylons, including mental health impacts of pylons, I think that it's perfectly fair to proceed with the development in that area, and then people make their choices. Most of this is affordable housing, is market housing, and therefore people will make their choices. The points about making sure that all of the social housing isn't in the place close to the pylons is obviously really important, and I think we've already dealt with that in terms of the tenure layout that can look at where the social and affordable housing goes. So for me, there don't seem to be obvious arguments against putting the development here or giving the permission for this area, given that given what we've heard about the plans and the status of this area of land. There's a clear housing need, and there's a clear need for not just for affordable housing, but for social housing. And I think that what we've heard, although obviously it's not a copper bottom guarantee, it looks like it would be the second biggest allocation of social housing of land for social housing we've had, certainly while I've been on this committee. And so I would, understanding the issues about health impacts, I would support this application and agree to it going forward.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd second that proposal with the inclusion of the tenure condition in terms of tenure distribution. Thank you.
Okay, we have a proposal to accept. It has been seconded. Are there any other comments from committee before we move on? Councillor Manners, please.
Can we just hear the condition that we're talking about for the housing? Yeah, the 10 years.
So essentially what you're looking for is it's a separate condition that goes on this outline planning consent if you were minded to grant it. And it requires the submission of a 10-year layout plan as part of the submission of reserved matters of layout. So rather than just get a layout plan, you'll also have which tenure is in which part of the block. So you'll know exactly where all the affordable housing is distributed across the site when you look at the reserved matters application.
Can we say we don't want to see it all at the northern end of the site?
Well, it's implicit that you'll have control over that distribution because you'll be determining committee as to how you, and they'll be aware following the discussion what
Yep,
they need to
okay.
avoid layout. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we move on to the votes. All for? All against? One abstention, so are there any other abstentions? Sorry, can you all show of hands again for this proposal? And there's one abstention. Okay, so that's passed with 11 for, 1 against and 1 abstention. Thank you. We'll take a quick 5-minute break, committee, before the next item. Okay, thank you, everyone. Agenda item 7, 2026/0043/MAR. Lands north of Bell Plantation, Watling Street, Toaster. I'll now hand over to Case Officer Dan Callis to begin the presentation.
Rob Burton.
Oh, sorry, Rob. I've skipped one, haven't I? Sorry, I've skipped skipping to the end here, committee. Clearly wanting to leave early. Just give me a sec. Agenda item number 6, 2025/0056/MIF Blaise Pascal House, 200 Pavilion Drive, Northampton. I'll now hand over to the correct officer, Rob Burton, to begin the presentation. Sorry, Rob.
Thank you, Chair. Application 2025/0056 MAF, Blaise Pascal House, 100 Pavilion Drive, Northampton. So this is for the erection of a replacement distribution warehouse with ancillary offices and servicing structures. This will be for use class B8, up to 17,782 square meters. That's gross external area, with the provision of associated infrastructure, including parking, manoeuvring areas, landscaping, ground remodeling works, drainage, utilities, engineering operations, and other associated works. Just before we start, I wanted to bring members' attention to the committee updates. So there's 2 updates for this item. First being an error within the report. So on page 2, there's reference to a Section 106 legal agreement. Just to be clear, the officer's recommendation does not include a Section 106 legal agreement. There's also an error on the agenda front sheet, which refers to the address as 200 Pavilion Drive, but it is 100 Pavilion Drive as per the officer report. So if we move on to the site location plan, on the left-hand side, you've got the red outline there showing the site. And on the right-hand side, you've got an aerial image of the site with the site outlined in red. So the site is situated within the Brack Mills Industrial Estate and is largely surrounded by employment uses. To the north is Pavilion Drive, with the Barclay Card campus opposite. To the east, you've got various employment uses, which come round to the south as well. And immediately to the south, you've got a cycle path, which connects to the Northampton Bike Park, which is seen there in the bottom left-hand side corner. And then to the west, you also have the bus terminal. So the nearest dwellings are just beyond that bike park in the bottom left-hand corner there. They're approximately 190 meters beyond the site. So if we go on to the site photos, this is a photo from, sorry, can I move that? So this is the existing building from Pavilion Drive. And we've got another shot there from Pavilion Drive, so you can see the existing landscaping. That is outside the site boundary. Then we've got a photograph there of the existing site access. That will be retained as part of the proposal. So then we've got an internal shot there. You can see the existing parking, landscaping, and the existing building, which will all go as part of the proposal. And there's another shot there. Then we've got a photograph here from Caswell Road, Pavilion Drive roundabout. So you can see there's some extensive vegetation, which is outside the site, but it does offer some screening towards the site. We've got a photograph here from Caswell Road. This is another access. This will also be retained as part of the proposal. Then we've got the cycle path to the south of the site. And this is a shot from the bike park. if you look just here, that's the existing building. And now we've got the proposed site plan. So this is showing how the development would be laid out. So the pedestrian and vehicular access points from Pavilion Drive would be retained, as would the HGV access from Caswell Road. The unit would be positioned to the northeastern corner with approximately 13-metre setback from the highway edge. Staff parking would be positioned to the northeastern corner. And the yard area would be positioned to the south. So next we've got the elevation plans. So this is the north and east elevations. The design features an ancillary office pod, which is positioned to the north of the building. This will create interest and surveillance. External materials will be silver, grey and green cladding, as well as a living wall to the front of the office pod. So the south and west elevations, fairly similar to the previous slide. You can see the office pod here at the front. So the ridge height there at the top will be 22 metres. The office pod would be approximately 14 metres. So now we've got the guardhouse elevations here. This will be positioned at the HGV access from Caswell Road. And finally, we've got a visual representation here to show how the development would look. So to conclude, the application has no objections and no outstanding technical consultations. Having considered the application against the development plan and material considerations, officers are recommending that the permission be granted subject to conditions as set out within the officer report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. Any questions from committee? Councillor Keeble?
Thank you. I wanted to ask about transport and in particular about the travel plan, because I note you referred to the bus terminal point, which is quite near this site. And there's also obviously the cycle routes, and you've got but there's still 148 parking bays, which is quite a lot. I assume this is warehouse development, is it? Because what discussions, it's all very well to provide parking, you know, bus stops, but you also have to have buses and you have to have them at the time when people work. And I've had to give people lifts to this kind of place. And they very often start working 9 or 10 at night and they finish in the wee hours of the morning. And, you know, and those are really difficult times for people to be cycling around. What realistic discussions or what realistic proposals are there in the travel plan, not just to provide bus stops, but to make sure that there are buses running that can get people to home? Because unlike some other places, I mean, the travel routes here, quite a lot of people who live in my ward in Darlington Spencer, they work in these places and they have to go there by car because there's no other way. So I'd be, you know, I'd push back on the travel plan as needing to be it needs to be something which actually provides people with sustainable transport options, not just one that puts bus stops in place and has a cycle route, but actually doesn't mean it's usable for people who need to get to and from work at the hours they need to get to and from work.
Yeah, okay. I mean, a draft travel plan has been submitted as part of the application, and that's been reviewed and accepted by the highways team. There is a condition on here, condition 12, which requires a detailed travel plan to be submitted, and that will again be sent off for consultation with the highways department to accept that.
Can I come back on that? Because it's one thing to have to say that you know the requirement is to send in a travel plan, so they send one in and it gets assessed and so on. It's quite a different thing to have an active travel plan which actually works, which gets people shifting out of cars and onto bus and other forms of transport. And actually cycling to and fro is quite challenging unless you're doing it during daylight hours. Now, if this gets wrong, then we have the kind of situation that we had, for example, at Greencore during COVID, when there was a complete factory shut down because of people doing car sharing, when actually it's virtually impossible to get to that factory any other way. It's possible, but it's extremely difficult, particularly at the hours that it needs to work. You know, what realistically, it's not just is there a plan? I'm sure there's a piece of paper that says different things, just like there are bus stops. It's what actual travel arrangements are there? Have you seen them? Are you satisfied that there is a proposal there that will enable people to get to this place or not at the hours it's going to be functioning? Because otherwise then we need to make our decision on the fact that there's a bus stop there, but there might not be any buses, which is quite a different decision to take.
So, I mean, we've just been looking at the travel plan here. I mean, it is in draft format, so we'll come back. And at the moment, we don't have an end user, so we're not 100% sure on the requirements. But the parking provision is in accordance with standards, which is why there are that number of spaces. But the site is considered highly sustainable within the Brackmills estate. It's connected to the footpaths, cycle paths, bus routes. And I think at this stage, I'm not sure what more we could do besides conditioning the travel plan and reviewing that when it comes in.
I'm sorry, but I mean, I really think, I don't see how you can say that a place is sustainable as a transport area. Previously, I've encountered someone whose son worked in Brackmills, and went down there to work, you know, to start a shift. If you're on minimum wage 0 hours, then you can be laid off, you know, like 2 in the morning, which this person was. And then how do you get home? You can't walk from there back over to, in this case, it was Headlands in the middle, you know, 2 o'clock in the morning. It's not particularly safe. It's not particularly comfortable either. If there's going to be a sustainable transport plan, then we need to be sure that it is actually going to work for the people who need to get to and fro, and that perhaps it's flexible enough that it will make sure that people don't have to do car sharing, which is what they would otherwise do to get into work, and that it will actually function at the hours that they need to get home. Is there any solution to that? Because this is an obvious one, you know, in other respects, this is a very obvious application and it should all be fairly straightforward, but it does need a travel plan, because this is exactly the kind of area that in Northampton proposes the biggest, puts forward the biggest challenge in terms of travel arrangements.
I mean, as Rob says, there has been effectively a draft travel plan submitted, and they will be required to submit a detailed one. Quite often when you get because this is the end user isn't known, but obviously it's in the end user's interest to have a workforce that can get to the site, and quite often these end users will provide a shuttle bus in the event that there isn't, for instance, a bus service there. But we haven't got that level of detail yet. That is yet to be approved to ensure that there is a suitable, sustainable travel plan that comes forward for the end user.
Sorry, I'm sorry to press this point, but I mean, people get to work because they need the money, and they get to work one way or the other, and then they get home one way or the other. But that is completely different from having a proper transport plan to get people to and from work in an orderly fashion. Typically in Northampton, they car share, they drive old cars, and they have to move from high density housing areas close to the centre of town out to these warehouses. And it kind of works, but if you're looking at a sensible transport policy and you're looking at sustainable transport, then it needs something more substantial than that. And I'm wondering if we can see the transport plan, the travel plan, before we have to finally approve the recommendation. Or if we can make it a condition or some such, particularly if you don't know the end user, it can be it can be all kinds of a warehouse.
So I mean, a detailed travel plan is conditioned, and there's also a requirement for that to be monitored to ensure it is effective. So those greater details will come forward at a later stage.
Can we, in the condition, actually state that we want to see a bus service? I mean, what is the situation there? Because I fully support Councillor Keeble's point. We shouldn't be building large industrial warehouses without adequate bus access.
I mean, ultimately, the Highway Authority and their travel plan team, sustainable transport team, have reviewed, and they haven't raised an objection in terms of providing additional bus services. There has to be appropriate level to meet that demand. And
we could condition on 106.
Highways haven't requested any additional bus services to.
Yeah, but we're not confident of highways. That's really the issue.
So at the moment, you've got the existing travel plan refers to 4 different bus services. I was just trying to get more detail on the service times for those, but you've got Stagecoach 12, which operates between Northampton and Brackmills. The frequency is every 30 minutes, Monday to Friday, Saturday. I haven't got the start times and end times. I don't know whether the agents can advise any more on this. There's another one that operates between Northampton, Mereway, via Brackmills, Wootton Fields, East Hunsbury. Again, 30-minute services. Stagecoach 51, which operates between Weston Fable and Brackmills via Northampton. Various times of the day for that one. Stagecoach 53 that operates between Northampton and Brackmills. So there are various bus services within the locality. I haven't got the details of how they operate throughout the night, which I think is what you're getting at in terms of shifts. Yeah.
Chair, a travel plan should be more than a list of the available bus services, because the travel plan, what it's supposed to do is to show how people get to and from work. Now, and that should be, I appreciate that it's not known who the end user is, but if it's a warehouse in Brackmills, then it's very likely going to be operating probably with quite a lot of workforce working at night and probably working on 0 hours minimum wage. And that means certain kind of shift patterns. And having had the experience of delivering people to and from that type of employment opportunity, it does require much more thought than simply putting a list of available bus routes. There was one service at a big warehouse at Grange Park, which did have a shuttle bus. It went from the middle of town, that I think was provided by the employers, but it only went like you know, you had to get there for like 7 o'clock in the morning. And if your local bus wasn't working, I mean, it was a complete nightmare. So I do think that the developers need to think very carefully about what hours the users of their factory are likely to be operating, and how they're actually going to get the workforce to and from work, not just a list of available bus stops. If you go down to some of the big sites down at Grange Park, you can see the sort of number of cars that go, that all turn up to pick people up when the shifts end, the lack of parking there for those kind of pickups, and the complete chaos that exists around bus services, to have an understanding that if Northampton is going to be able to grow this type of employment opportunity, then it really does have to sort out some sustainable transport route for the workforce to be able to get from the areas where the lower cost housing is to the areas where the employment opportunities are, without everybody having to go by car. And to be honest, I mean, cycling is an option for some people, but we don't have a comprehensive network of cycle routes through the middle of town. And for a lot of people, that isn't an option, and walking is just too far.
Chair, can I make a suggestion? So we do have condition 12 that relates to the requirement to submit a detailed travel plan. So we can add a bit more into that travel plan should demonstrate how sustainable transport measures will be made available for employees throughout the, I need to think of the terminology, but effectively, if it's, we don't know whether through operational hours, thank you, that was the word I was trying to think of. So we can strengthen that condition to add that in and make it clear that that's what we're after. Okay.
Councillor Cartwright, please.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Thanks. This is a well-established industrial estate. There seems to be many different options for travel you can put in the travel plan, but I'm not sure how you enforce like door-to-door transport for all workers to put this on the builder who's building the warehouse. We don't even know who's going to be in there. So this is just a plan to build a warehouse, isn't it?
Do you have any more questions? Councillor Pipes, please.
Yeah, it's not a question. I've just looked at the building was owned by IPSL and they had 775 people working there. We're trying to approve something for a third of that. So is there any real issues at the moment?
Councillor Purcell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm at paragraph. I'm looking at the BREEAM standards, very good. Is this going to include solar panels on the roof, this application?
Yes, it will do, yes. Within the officer report, or it's, I think it's within the sustainability statement submitted as part of the application. I'm trying to scan the report. I can't see it. It's not in that paragraph 8.14. Yeah, I don't believe it's in the report, but it's within the submission.
We can ask the agent to clarify that when they speak.
Okay, do you have any other questions, committee? Okay, can I ask Agent Donna Stock, please, to step up?
Good afternoon, Chair, members, and thank you for the opportunity to address you. We wish to place on record our support for your office's recommendation to our client's application and to provide a little bit more context to the decision before you. As you are aware from both the officer's report and from your site visit, the application is set within the context of an existing well-established commercial estate. Indeed, the site already has an outdated building in situ and a prior consent to clear the site for redevelopment. The rationale for the replacement of the existing building is twofold. The marketing of the site has shown demand for different size and shape buildings since the existing building on site was constructed some 30 odd years ago. The construction methods used for the building mean the existing building is uneconomical to heat and occupy in a sustainable way, and indeed is a key reason to why the building is now vacant. Our client, a major investor in warehousing, is committed to the redevelopment of the site in order to deliver significantly higher environmental standards and provide a betterment to the configuration of space to allow local businesses to move into it and allow the local economy to thrive. Our client has a track record of delivering award-winning projects with a major focus on environmental and social responsibility throughout the UK, all of which have been welcomed by the local communities with which they have been developed. The proposed new building is designed to appear as a bookend to the roundabout in which it's situated and to reinforce the existing street scene. As you have seen from the officer's presentation, the trees all around the edge are situated outside of the side boundary for a specific reason, so that they're all retained to obviously shield some of the development. Our client has been approached by a number of potential occupiers who are interested in occupying the building once completed. Following your decision today, if conditional permission, our client is keen to work at pace to ensure the new building is realised, along with its associated benefits to your community, which includes up to 200 new jobs and increased council tax revenue arising from the increased floor space. The proposals before you seeks to dramatically improve the sustainability credentials of the existing building by using materials that provide for enhanced heat efficiency and improved sustainable drainage system, solar PV and rain harvesting facilities, along with a supported travel plan that we've talked at length about. I'll come on to that shortly. The building is designed to achieve BREEAM excellent status with aspirations to meet outstanding, both which are far superior to the current building's credentials. In addition to this facility provides for new amenity spaces that provide improved social and health values. After due consultation and consideration, your planning officer has recommended to you that the proposal is consistent with both national and local planning policies related to the redevelopment of brownfield land in a commercial location. Furthermore, the proposal provides for significant benefits in commercial, social, and environmental terms, and therefore we trust that you will support the recommendations made by the consultees in your planning team to conditionally approve the project. I'm happy to answer questions, but I am very conscious that two essentially were arising. I think one was around the PV and the travel plan, so if you'll forgive me, I'll try to help answer those. As rightly suggested, we don't know who the end user currently is, albeit the building as it currently stands did occupy an operator that probably sustained more transport significance than the current proposals, certainly that's set out in the transport statement that's applied with the application. There is a extreme amount of parking, I would say, but that's to meet the parking standards that's set out within your own guidance. Notwithstanding that, based on our experience, the occupiers that we've got for these types of units coming forward unlikely are to need or require kind of that length of parking. But in any event, the reason that we provide an interim travel plan is just to provide you a bit of a taster on the types of things that many of the occupiers do provide as incentives in order to promote sustainable travel. But notwithstanding that, the whole reason for the conditional requirement is as soon as that operator or occupier is known, which we're happy to say our client works with very responsible occupiers that wish to ensure that obviously the safety of their employees is tantamount. So that will take into account the full consideration of that, and we're certainly happy to support the updating of the condition to be clear. Would you like me to just cover the solar panel, or would you like to?
Any questions, please, Councillor Keeble?
Thank you. I thought that the additional recommendation or the rewording of the recommendations that the officer provided was very helpful in terms of once you've got of having something which reflects a need for the end user to consider the way the sort of hours and the kind of movements, shift patterns that their workers are going to be working, and sort of look at how the best arrangements can be put in place, which are likely to be use of public transport for chunks of it, but maybe a shuttle bus for part of it, so that you ease the impact of a lot of vehicles travelling by road, because quite a lot of the vehicles, if you look and and it depends entirely on the type of employment, but where the vehicles are quite old, there's obviously issues about wear and tear. There's obviously impact on roads as well. And if we're going to seriously move towards more sustainable types of transport, then that means looking at sort of proper partnership working with employers to make sure that people can get to and from work. So if you're happy with that, I mean, I was very happy with the changed wording that was suggested, if that suits what you need as well.
Yes, no, thank you. I think really, like you say, we don't know. There's different occupiers have different requirements and needs, and as you say, very different shift patterns, to be honest, of which we don't have the knowledge of that at this moment. So for that. There was a query on solar PV. We wanted to know how much.
Yes, Chair, I was just going to pick up on that issue to ask. I mean, I'm encouraged that it's excellent and going to outstanding, but what do you have a sense of what percentage of the roof might be solar panels?
Yeah, so we have a plan that's supported with the planning application, which is going to be an approved plan as part of the pack, if you're so minded to approve, and that's at around about 60% of the roof coverage.
Do we have any other questions, committee? No, thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Officers? Okay, committee, can we move to debate this application, please? Does anyone want to start? Councillor Purcell?
Yes, Chair, I propose that with the amendments to the conditions that we accept this application.
Okay, we have a proposal to accept the officer's recommendation in full with the added. Yep, and it's been seconded by Councillor Keeble. Are there any other comments, questions, debating points the committee would wish to make before we move on to the votes? Councillor Cartwright.
Thank you, Chair. The idea of a shuttle bus that goes from one place to another, that's why it's a shuttle bus. I'm not sure where you drop people off at 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning that makes the shuttle bus a good idea, and how that saves anybody getting out of that shuttle bus going home. Just for your thoughts when you try to do a travel plan.
Councillor Keeble.
Thank you. I mean, the point of the travel plan is to get an agreed way of trying to get people to work and back as efficiently as possible. It's not a set down prescription for how that should be done. But in general, what you're trying to do is to to minimise the number of cars all driving to the same place, at the same time. I mean, we all know how many potholes there are on the road. So to minimise that and to actually try to start people thinking about more effective use of different forms of shared transport. I mean, the shuttle bus is one that some people use in some areas, but it's not a set down prescription. The main thing is the willingness, which I think the last speaker showed, that they're prepared to look at something and find a constructive way forward, which is all you're really looking for.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, perhaps you could also, if got plenty of room on that site, if they built some accommodation, keep the employees right there as well, and that'll save all the transport costs. If we can mix residential and commercial.
Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair. I travel down this road most days. I used to work in that building occasionally, worked at Barclaycard. There's absolutely, it's a recognised industrial estate. Travel plans are already in place, everything's in place. If people want to work there, they work out how they're going to get there. And you say, well, reduce the amount of cars to get a shuttle bus. Car sharing is a feasible way of getting there and reducing traffic. I just think we spent far too much time worrying about the transport on this one and looking at the benefits of what it's doing there. It's a like-for-like building, less people working there. It's got loads of solar panels that's going on the roof. It fits the bill. I just move on to the vote.
Okay, on that note, we will move on to the votes. All those for the proposal to accept? Against? One abstention, so the proposal is carried. Abstentions? Sorry, Councillor Hughes. The proposal is carried. 11 for, 2 abstentions. Thank you very much. Move on to item 7. For the second time. 2026/0043/MAR, lands north of Bell Plantation, Watling Street, Towcester. I'll now hand over to the actual Dan Callis to begin the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So item 7 is an application for the approval of all reserve matters in relation to the erection of employment units on plots 2 and 3 on the site known as land north of Bell Plantation, Towcester. The proposal includes employment and distribution floor space with ancillary office space, associated landscaping, service yards, parking and other infrastructure. So just to remind the committee, I'm sure the committee is familiar with the site, but just to remind everyone, so we're looking at AL1, which is the allocation in the middle here, and the site is predominantly the northern half of AL1, and then we have also employment allocation AL3 to the east, and then the smaller AL2 to the southwest. And then in terms of the site, so the overall site is the blue line, and that's the area that was covered by the hybrid application that was approved and granted planning permission at appeal around a year ago. And the application we have now before us for reserve matters is for only the areas outlined in red. There's 2 separate parcels, which are plots 2 and 3. One thing I would just point out is the location of the nearest non-ancillary dwellings. So we have Brickyard Farm, which is just outside the site to the east, down here, adjacent to Zone 5, which is the football land. To the north, up here, we have Oak Tree Farm, which is approximately 220 metres outside the overall site area. And then on the western side, on the opposite side of the A5, we have Bairstows Lodge, which is here. And then immediately south of that, we have Jacks Hill Truck Stop and a crane hire business in here. So they're the sort of adjacent uses to the site other than agricultural land. So the proposal is for a single warehouse on each parcel, shown on the screen as units 2 and 3. And then there's also in this area here, a sewer pumping station, which serves the whole site. The hatched area, so you can see there's like a sort of vertical red hatching, which includes the site access, Unit 1, and the strategic landscaping to the site's periphery, already has full detailed planning permission as part of the outline, sorry, the hybrid permission. Zone 4, which is down here, the purpley area, sorry, pinky purple area, would be subject to separate reserve matters application in the future. And as I've just said, Zone 5 is the football land, which will ultimately be prepared and transferred to West Northants Council as part of the Section 106 agreement. As we can see, both Units 2 and 3 are accessed from the main internal spine road. Unit 2 has staff parking on its northern side of the building and the service yard on the southern side here. So the access for the service yard in this position, access for the car park here. And then Unit 3 has staff car parking to the north. So that's in this area with an access off the spine road here. And the service yard along the site's frontage to the internal spine road. So obviously keeping the service yard inside the development rather than on the outside, with the access to that being towards the southern end of the unit here. So just looking at Zone 2 in detail, it's single warehouse with a total floor space of 33,605 square metres. There are 299 car parking spaces provided, of which 58 would be EV charging spaces and 29 would be disabled spaces. There are 12 motorcycle parking bays and bicycle storage shelters are provided for 70 bicycles. The service yard has 33 loading door bays, 4 level access doors and 58 HGV parking spaces, which we can't quite see, but they're just along the bottom side of the site along the boundary here. There's also space for possible future sprinkler tank and pump house, so that's indicatively shown here. And there's a condition on the hybrid consent which would require submission of details of those for approval should they be required. And then there's some on-plot landscaping, which is primarily just around the access point here, and then around the access points here, there's a staff welfare area and just some sort of ornamental areas in and around that entrance. There's fencing to the site's perimeter, which would be 2.4 metre high weld mesh, green weld mesh fencing. And then there are 2 substations just in this position up the top here on the Spine Road frontage. So in terms of the elevations, the building would be 21.5 metres tall. So the top elevation you can see here is the north elevation, which is onto the internal spine road. The office is located towards the left-hand or eastern end, sort of also towards the end where the access is into the staff car park. The cladding is predominantly dark green and dark grey, with light grey above 18.5 metres, which is consistent with, and the colours chosen and the profile of the cladding, etc., is consistent with that's already consented on plot 1 as part of the hybrid permission, and is also consistent with the approved design code. Moving round the east elevation here, you can see the transport office, which is within the service yard, and as we pan round to the rear elevation, you can see that's midway along that rear elevation to the service yard. And then the bottom elevation you can see here is the west elevation, which would the side which would face towards the A5. In terms of landscaping, this is the detail shown here, but you can see it's relatively small areas of primarily ornamental planting around the entrances to the plot. This shows elevations of the gatehouse, which would provide security to the service yard entrance. This plan applies, or the elevations, what you can see here, applies equally to both units 2 and 3, so they'd both have basically identical gatehouses. And then just to finish on unit 2, this is a CGI image from within the centre of the site. So you've got the A5 is off the image to the right-hand side. You come up the main internal access spine road to here, and then this is sort of looking south towards the front of unit 2, and the football land is further off down that road in that direction there. Moving on to unit 3. So I've rotated this 90 degrees just so it fits on the screen better, but ultimately the north end is the left-hand end of the image. It's a single warehouse with a total floor space of 38,283 square metres. There are 330 parking spaces, of which 66 would be EV charging and 33 would be disabled. There are 16 motorcycle parking bays, 80 spaces within the cycle shelter. The service yard has 40 loading door bays, 4 level access doors, 75 HGV parking spaces, and an HGV turning area, which you can see here. Again, space for possible future sprinkler tanks in this position here. On-plot landscaping is similar to before. There's primarily around the 2 access points. There is some also along the spine road frontage along here, and then the staff welfare area in this area. Again, fencing on the site's perimeter. You can see more clearly the position of the sewer pumping station, and there are 2, I don't know if I can actually move this. There we go, let's move that out of the way. So you can see here the 2 substations at the front of the site. Again, elevations very similar to unit 2 in terms of the cladding arrangement is basically the same. In terms of the elevation, the top one is what you would see as you come into the site and up the internal spine road, and that would be facing towards you. You can see the offices at the north end, extreme north end on there, and those primarily have a frontage out towards the north elevation, as you can see there. The rear elevation is the east elevation, so that's the side you would see from the open countryside and from Donkey Lane to the east of the site. And then the southern elevation you can see there as well. So landscaping, as I said, again, primarily relatively small areas of ornamental landscaping, because this is purely within the development plots themselves. There's the strategic landscaping around the site periphery provides the vast majority of the landscaping. There's street trees along the internal spine road and a hedge there, and then there's some hedging around the sewer pumping station. And finally, just on that CGI of this unit, so this is looking from the north corner of the site, it's looking sort of south east, just showing that arrangement. In terms of levels, we've got a finished floor level of 108.7 metres. That's above ordnance datum for unit 2, and then unit 3, we've got 108.9. I think that says, I can't quite see from here. Yeah, 108.9. So both those finished floor levels fully comply with the parameters on the hybrid permission and the conditions that were stipulated on those. In terms of how the site will be finished, this plan is quite useful. It sort of gives it an indication as to the cut and fill. So the orange and red areas are where the site would be lowered in the middle, and it demonstrates how the site's quite convex in form at the moment. And then as you move through the greens from light green to dark green and then into the greys, that's where there would be fill, i.e. the existing levels would be increased, with this most significant increase being small areas, particularly to the north and south of the site access roundabout here. But as I said, that's largely in accordance with the hybrid application and the landscaping scheme that was approved at that stage. And then in terms of, just to finish, the drainage strategy, now drainage is covered by conditions on the outline, so would be approved separately, but just to give an indication as to how that's intended to operate, each unit has its own largely freestanding drainage system. So unit 2, as you see, has that here, and that discharges ultimately into an outfall, which is a ditch on the A5, and so that would be as agreed at the hybrid application stage. That's a National Highways asset and requires their approval, but they've confirmed that they don't have any objection in principle to that. And then unit 3 drains down here into an attenuation basin, which then discharges out to the brook on the eastern side of the site. Okay, so in terms of representations on the application, there's no outstanding objections from any technical consultees. There are, however, objections from 3 local parish councils and also from the action group known as Save Towcester Now. The application has received 18 objections from local residents. There have been no third-party submissions in support. The most common objections relate to highway traffic impacts and landscape and visual effects of the development overall, as well as several other matters. A full list of the objections is listed in the report. With regard to updates, members' attention is drawn to the written updates, and in particular, the response from WNC Ecology confirming that they have no objection to this reserved matters application. In summary, the proposal is considered to fully comply with the parameters set out in the approved hybrid/outline permission, the approved design code for the development, the requirements of policy AL1 and other relevant policies of the development plan, as well as the adopted SPD that covers the employment allocations. The appearance of the development is consistent with that already approved for Unit 1, ensuring harmony in that regard, and there are no objections from any statutory or technical consultees. Consequently, it's recommended that the committee grants delegated authority to officers to approve the application, subject to the conditions outlined in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions from committee? Councillor Pipes.
I take it this is the main Towcester roundabout, not the one that's on the illustration. That's still going to be expanded, is it? That's still going ahead? And if so, can we make a condition that warehouses don't operate until it is done? Because I can't see how that's going to work. It gets clogged up already.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, there's a condition on the outline consent. There are several conditions on the hybrid outline consent, one of which does require the improvements to the Tove roundabout, as it's known, the A5, A43 roundabout, to be completed prior to, I believe, off the top of my head, prior to first occupation of any units on the development site. There's other conditions as well, like the Towcester Relief Road has to be finished and open as well, and also they have to construct the site access roundabout by a certain juncture as well. So yeah, there's 40 odd conditions on the hybrid consent.
Councillor Manners, please.
Thank you, Chair. Dan, could you just give the committee at the scale how large these buildings are, just for information, in terms of meters?
The heights of the building?
No, the heights. I know the heights at 21.5. Just remind me how long these buildings are and how wide they are.
In terms of the actual length?
Yeah.
I don't actually have that information to hand.
But huge is the...
Yeah, I mean, they are in the 30,000s of
Yeah.
square meters,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, okay. It's not a material planning concern. Save Toaster Now sent us all some of the questions, and I'd quite like just to go through those if I may.
Okay.
The first one was the landscaping. The appeal report wanted 15 years, and your set of guidelines on page 114.4 of 5 years. Why are we having a difference in 5 and to the main structure at 15? And the prelude of the question is, if I walk anywhere to the west of the M1, Panattoni didn't make any effort to screen that development. It's a huge blot, and it could have been improved by effective landscaping. That was in 2016. So their record of looking after sites and proposing isn't exemplary.
Okay, yes, so thank you. I think with regard to condition 4 in the recommendation, I think it's a fair point that that does say only 5 years, whereas the conditions on the outline hybrid say 15. If I'm completely honest, I think condition 4 is on this recommendation is arguably superfluous, given the conditions on the outline. There's a requirement for, notwithstanding the reserve map, what we have with the reserve matters, for a detailed landscaping scheme to be approved via a separate condition discharge application, and that would be bound by the 15-year maintenance.
So could we change this condition then, please?
Well, I mean, I would probably suggest that we just strike it out, if I'm quite honest, because I think it's superfluous because it's already covered by.
Well, I'd rather it
conditions.
was actually in there as 15 years. Then there's absolutely
I mean,
no.
that's the-
I don't.
that's-
I don't want to be ambiguous in this.
I'm don't see a problem necessarily in doing that.
Okay.
It would be duplicative, arguably, but yeah, I mean, I don't.
But this is a separate application, of course, isn't it? Although it's covered by the hybrid.
Well, they all come under the umbrella of the hybrid consent.
Okay.
So yes, they all sort of tie in together.
Yeah. And the other one was on lighting. We are in open countryside here. And although your report states that there'll be no impact on lighting to the residential amenity, if you live in Caldicot, you will definitely see this, or see the white light. So what confidence or assurance can you give to the locals and those people who live in Dunkirk too will see the white light? I mean, what I'm looking for is more of an assurance that I really want you as a planning department to rigorously challenge the lighting proposals to say they're absolutely minimized, albeit given that there's 24-hour working.
Yeah, thank you. So again, there is a condition on the condition 24 of the hybrid consent, which requires details of external lighting. And so that would need to be discharged separately to the grant of this consent. I think there was a comment about the report had suggested that there wasn't any impact on amenity. I think the paragraph referred to was talking about impact on neighbouring properties in terms of impact of loss of light rather than artificial light. It was, yeah, it was more sort of an overshadowing thing rather than an artificial light point. But yes, certainly, absolutely, there's a requirement that they comply with, I can't remember the exact name, but environmental zone E2 or something, which is basically a very low level of light spill, light pollution, given the rural edge area of the site. And that's something that officers will absolutely drill into.
When you get into that discussion, is it possible for you to come back to the parish councils to actually so that they feel involved in that particular level of discussion?
Don't have a concern with that at all. No, that should be fine. I mean, what I would say is that essentially the lighting scheme that would be required would result in virtually no light spill beyond the boundaries of the site at all. As with a lot of development now, when it's designed to a high level, yes, you might see a bit of a glow, particularly on a sort of foggy night or something where the atmosphere is glowing, but
Okay.
you shouldn't necessarily see the source
Okay,
of
well,
light.
my experience of the Silverstone, the Aston Martin, was absolutely contrary to that, which they have, to be fair to them, they have corrected that. But it was a shocking display of white light at night, which was approved by our lighting experts, astonishingly. Okay, good. Thank you for that. And then the point B, the non-potable water supply. I'm not sure if your paragraph actually makes sense on that, but maybe you can help clarify that. Because non-potable water basically is not for not drinking water, is my understanding.
Yes, so this was in response to a comment by the consultation response by Anglian Water. And if I can just go to that. Yeah, so essentially what we've done is sought to include a condition. Anglian Water didn't necessarily object to the proposal, but for sort of completeness and peace of mind, the recommendation includes a condition requiring the submission of that, and that's consistent with what we've done on development elsewhere. You know, the wording of that condition. If we feel that members feel that the wording could be improved, then we can certainly explore that.
It's a relatively minor point, and it's really about Anglian Water.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the developer will need to seek agreement direct with Anglian Water as to what sort of draw they have on the local water supply network. But I think for the purposes of the local planning authority, we've sought to include a condition just to give clarity and peace of mind on that.
Yeah. And then point C, the flood risk technical note that was submitted before this reserve matters application, but not a certificate of compliance with the original approved scheme as required by condition 43 of the inspector's report. I'm not, if you can clarify that for us, that would be
I mean,
helpful.
Personally, I don't know what a certificate would necessarily look like if it wasn't just the content of the technical note.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think it has to take a certain form per se. There's nothing prescribed in the condition as to what it is. We have ultimately consulted with the League Local Flood Authority, who were the ones who requested the condition in the first place, and they've come back and have raised no objection on the reserve matters application. So I mean, the League Local Flood Authority are not easily satisfied when it comes to you know, the level of detail submitted. So I think the fact that they're satisfied means that what we've got is adequate to address that.
Okay. And then points E and F on the note that we sent, if you could actually respond after this meeting to me on those, that would be on the committee, that would be very helpful, rather than getting into the depth, the weeds on this.
Absolutely.
Excuse the pun on flood, but
yes. I mean, again, I would say that there's a lot of stuff in the hybrid consent which deals with that. I think one of the points raised actually relates to how you would discharge the condition, which is separate. It's a separate process, separate application to what we're considering here. But absolutely more than happy to clarify anything after the meeting.
Yeah, that's point on the flooding, but the noise, particularly on the noise point E, just going back to that, apologies, was that it should be based on measurement rather than prediction.
Yes, I mean, the wording of the condition in the hybrid consent is what it is, and we will have to work with that. You know, this isn't an opportunity to seek to change the scope or the remit.
No,
of that
I'm not
consent,
trying to change it. I'm just trying to make sure that we have the power to measure, once it's open, the noise impact on Caldicot.
Yes, I mean, as I said, the wording of the condition is what it is, and I think that's, from memory, it was, it required discharge prior to, no, where are we? Condition 28. Prior to occupation of the building. So we have to discharge it prior to occupation. The actual noise, the sort of experience noise thereafter, that would ultimately be a matter for environmental protection legislation.
So the baseline will be the prediction.
Yes.
And then therefore, if it's over the prediction, then environmental health can get involved.
If it becomes a statutory nuisance or,
Yes,
or whatever, it meets
absolutely.
their criteria. But
Yeah.
the wording of the condition, we have to do it prior to occupation. So we can't do a baseline of actual experienced noise level during operation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I will. Just for the members of the committee, apologies for the length of questioning, but the villages of Caldicot, Dunkirk and parts of Green Norton will be severely affected by this development. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to actually ask those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manners. Councillor Keeble?
Thank you very much. I completely agree with the points that have been raised about the light pollution and hope that that will come back. I assume that the travel arrangements were considered under the previous planning application, were they? Because obviously there's even more parking spaces here. So was the travel plan considered under the previous one, the previous application?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, so when we did the hybrid consent, obviously one of the reasons the council refused the application initially was on transport and highway impacts. Ultimately, where we got to with the appeal was that there's a travel plan secured through that, and that will be monitored, and that will seek to take certain measures to encourage, sustainable modes of travel. But yes, all of those aspects really they were considered previously.
The third point was just you mentioned about the lead local authority. I mean, I was going to ask, I don't know if is that Towcester Town Council? Because, I mean, I see Towcester Town Council hasn't, they're down as having not responded to the last round of consultation, which just surprised me very much, given what I imagine there must be a very lively interest in Towcester in regard to this application. I wondered if there was any explanation as to why they had completely not commented.
Yeah, I don't know, if I'm honest. I think there was a submission they made fairly early in the application asking for an extension of time on submitting comments, but then I didn't receive, or we didn't receive anything subsequent to that. So I don't know. I know that there was a change of staff in terms of the clerk, etc. So I don't know why. I equally, like yourself, I was anticipating comments from them, but we didn't receive anything. But in terms of your other question, the lead local flood authority is a separate, it's a separate technical consultee who cover that specific point. Thank you.
Councillor Humphreys?
Yes, through you, Chair. Councillor Manners, no need to apologise. These are really important concerns to these villages who are going to be so affected. I think there were just a couple of things in the email that members were sent by, say, Towcester 9, still to be covered. One is maintaining the landscaping in perpetuity, which is referred to in the appeal decision, but I think it's not covered in the conditions here, or perhaps it is in the outline.
Thank you. Sorry. Yes, so with regard to that, I think the requirements of the hybrid were that it was maintained for 15 years. For replanting, but then yes, it would be in perpetuity. I think the point I would make with the application before us is that there is very little landscaping, and most of it is really sort of ornamental stuff around the entrances to the buildings. So it's not really contributing to the overall sort of strategic landscaping of mitigating. Yeah, I mean, it does, but I think a lot of what it will be is ornamental trees and different coloured shrubs to make the entrances look nice, rather than being structural landscaping to help screen the development and soften its appearance. Yes, we'll certainly revisit that and put the 15 years back in and make sure that everything correlates with what was consented on the hybrid, yeah.
Thank you. And there's just one other point, which was in the flood risk technical note diagram, the southwest outfall 3 discharges to the boundary of AL3 when it should extend all the way down to the stream at the eastern edge of the site. Perhaps that's implied, but anyway, that was a concern for the
yes, so I think with that, I would just reiterate the point that the surface water drainage, ultimately, the detail of that is more for a separate condition discharge application, which the LLFA, I can assure all members, will rigorously, review that information and ensure that there's everything that they need.
Thank you.
Councillor Manners? Yeah. Anyone else? Councillor Cartwright?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just for clarification, they'll do this after the landscaping's been done. I think they're going to not leave the heights as they are. This is all going to get bulldozed around to level out the land.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So essentially, the initial phase of development will be site-wide earthworks, which will be required to do the cut and the fill, create the bunds around the site area, also create the plateau where the football pitches would ultimately go. And then there's, I can't remember exactly, again, off the top of my head, but the condition requires, condition 33, detailed landscaping approved as part of the, so basically the strategic landscaping shall be fully implemented prior to first occupation. So they do all that, and then whilst they're building the first building, they put all the landscaping in, and it's sort of there from day one, essentially.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions before we move on to public speaking? Okay, can I ask James Guthrie, please, to step up?
Good afternoon. Thank you all for allowing me the time to speak in support of this application today. My name is James Guthrie. I'm Planning Director at Quad, and I'm the agent acting on behalf of Panattoni. I'm really pleased to be here today. It represents a major step forward in realising the opportunity at the land north of Bell Plantation. Pre-commencement conditions, many of which Dan has referred to, are either determined, it's about 3 or 4 have been determined to date, or are in for determination at the moment. So questions related to drainage, lighting, the information is there to be reviewed if people so wish to. We remain in positive discussions with other officers regarding those final matters, and we hope to commence development at the site very soon. As a reminder, and we've covered it in detail today, Unit 1 and all the key landscaping is already approved in full and will be delivered as part of Phase 1, whilst today's reserve matters application is seeking permission for Units 2 and 3 and those minor associated bits of landscaping only. As set up by Mr. Callis, the application is entirely in accordance with the approved parameters plans and the design codes, and it's probably worth noting that both units fall considerably under the maximum floor space permitted for each zone. These will deliver best-in-class employment floor space for the region, and Panattoni's investment in this site is a show of confidence in West Northamptonshire as a place to do business and generate jobs. I don't propose going any further than that with all the questions answered and asked today, but I'll be happy to take any further questions you might have. Thank you.
Committee, any questions? No? Councillor Pipes?
The roundabout that you're going to build for the site entrance, will that be built before proper building starts? You know, the actual excavation work. I'm just thinking of the chaos that may cause if we're waiting for traffic to turn left or right out of it into it.
So that's currently covered by condition, I'll just make sure I get this right. Condition 5. So effectively we can start earthworks at this stage because there's already an access off the A5, but any building above ground level requires the delivery of that A5 roundabout first. So the major works, yes.
Okay, if there are no other questions, thank you, James.
Thank you.
Officers?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, so we'll move on to the debate. Does anyone want to start off? Councillor Furman?
Thank you. Could I just ask a quick question of highways? When the last assessment was done for the site, please?
Chair, we don't have highways here with us today. I mean, in terms of the assessments, they were all done as part of the hybrid application that was ultimately approved at appeal last year. So they ranged from, I don't know, roughly 2020 to 2024. Yes.
Sorry, from 2020, did you say?
Approximately, yes. I mean, I can't remember the exact dates, but that's the sort of period we were dealing with the hybrid application initially.
So no assessment's been done after that?
Well, I'm trying to recall exactly what occurred, but I think, yeah, but it's when in terms of when the modelling was undertaken, I seem to recall it was 2024 or some, that it was updated periodically during the application.
Thank you.
I'm just looking at the applicant's agent who's nodding, so I think I'm approximately correct.
Very quiet committee. Councillor Gaskell, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank Councillor Manners for taking on what you did on behalf of all the committee, I gather. Most of us, as I say, we all got that email. I think you asked all the questions eloquently enough. My question is really to do with that now. Going forward with this, if we are going to take it forward, what are the conditions that we want to use on that, to propose?
Yeah, yeah, thank you, Chair. So just to clarify on that point, if it assists members, the officers have confirmed that we will look to update condition 4 on the recommendation, particularly the reference where it currently says 5 years to increase that to 15, and obviously ensure that the wording is consistent with the conditions on the hybrid consent. Thank you.
Councillor Purser.
Well, Chair, I still have great reservations about this development, but given the inspector's report, I don't think we have any option but to follow our officer's advice on this matter. So I propose we follow the officer's recommendation and accept this report.
Just to clarify, Councillor Purser, that's to accept with the condition 4 update as well.
Absolutely, yes.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Cartwright, thank you. Is any other debating points the committee wish to make before we move on to the vote? No? Okay, so we'll move on to the vote. All for? Against? Abstentions? Okay, so Councillor Purser's proposal to accept has carried 11-4, no against, 2 abstentions. Moving on to item 8, urgent business. There are no items of urgent business and I therefore now close the meeting at 16:31. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.